Hello, my name is Tumani Mutasa Nyajeka, and I am here to give a few highlights on an international conflict that has been going on in Southern Africa, in Botswana, Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. HIV and AIDS has killed millions of people and continues to kill thousands of people per day in the region. It is a Holocaust. Many people globally are still not aware that HIV and AIDS continues to decimate thousands of indigenous people and their communities in this region today. The origin of HIV and AIDS is unknown. There are many scientific theories. However, many physicians continue to predict that by 2060, Southern Africa as a region would have been depleted by up to 75% of its population. By 2005, 13 million people had already died of HIV and AIDS. 25 million were infected and 12 million children were orphaned. HIV and AIDS was detected or identified in Southern Africa in 1982. And the roots or main issues about HIV and AIDS in the region are rooted in the history of Southern Africa. They are poverty, malnutrition, lack of access to health care, particularly of indigenous peoples. And also Southern Africa is a region with cultural and structural violence which has continued all along all the way from 500 years of oppression and repression. The main actors in this conflict are the governments, the Southern African governments and state who have struggled to understand this epidemic and figure out how to address it. The international community is also a main actor, as well as the multinational business institutions and communities. Yes, there are also the international humanitarian agencies like the United Nations and NGOs, international and local. The turning point for HIV and AIDS in Southern Africa, many scholars agree that it escalated, the epidemic escalated when the governments instituted budget cuts due to global financial institutional mandates. When these budget cuts occurred, it was in the areas of healthcare, education, and nutrition for indigenous or post-apartheid communities. HIV and AIDS is definitely a protracted conflict, because many scholars like Stephen Lewis, who worked on the issue of HIV and AIDS in the 90s with the United Nations, a Canadian diplomat, he has argued to say this conflict is really going nowhere, because the governments and the international community has really failed to address and engage it is at the level of killing. It is at the level of its expression is almost a Holocaust. There has been a lot of initiatives to really try to address this epidemic or this Holocaust by international agencies, regional states. But again, as I have said, people like Steve Lewis have argued to say it has been a little, too late, as the funding continues to be either too limited or it comes in trickle down quantities and rarely gets to the communities that are really suffering and are dying. The third parties in this conflict have not only been the global powers or imperial powers, both in the East and the West, but also multinational business organizations and companies which dictate government policy in the region in terms of where to invest and how to invest. If I were to seek resolution to this conflict, first, I would really engage all resources. I would use resolution approaches and frameworks which are designed not just to stop the Holocaust, but also in the long term empower these communities that have been poor and been under assault for the last 500 years. I would begin by stopping the carnage, which means